Welcome to Session 3 of our study on the Book of Proverbs. In this session, we'll read and discuss the last 3 chapters of the first unit, that is, chapters 7, 8, and 9. We will see the father telling a story and again warning his son about the strange woman. We'll hear directly from Lady Wisdom and compare the banquet invitations from Lady Wisdom and Lady Folly. We will introduce the second unit, reading and discussing a number of one-verse proverbs from chapter 10 and 11. But first, let's open with a word of prayer. O God, our Father, open our eyes and enlighten our minds as we study your word. So grant that our minds may know your truth and our hearts may feel your love, and then confirm and strengthen our wills that we may go out to live what we have learned. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. So, beware the seductress. This is chapter 7. Chapter 7 is the last of 4 lectures dealing with the strange woman or the loose woman. We heard about the strange woman in chapter 2, chapter 5, and again in chapter 6. Here, the focus is on the seductive power this strange woman wields through her sinuous and flattering words. So we're going to read verses 1 through 5, chapter 7. My child, keep my words and store up my commandments with you. Keep my commandments and live. Keep my teachings as the apple of your eye. Bind them on your fingers. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call insight your intimate friend, that they may keep you from the loose woman, from the adulteress with her smooth words. These verses sound a lot like what we've heard before, the father talking to his son and telling him to listen to his words and follow his commandments. But from this point in this chapter, things change. The remainder of the chapter is a narrative, a story. This is still poetry, but where up until now we've been listening to exhortations on wisdom and listening to the do's and don'ts of life, verses 6 through 23. We have a story. So let's begin with 6 through 9. The father begins his story. For at the window of my house I looked out through my lattice, and I saw among the simple ones, I observed among the youths, a young man without sense, passing along the street near her corner, taking the road to her house in the twilight and the evening, at the time of night and darkness. So in verses 6 through 23, the writer recounts an event he purportedly observed. The father supposedly has seen this seduction of a youth by a married woman. This is obviously a fictitious story, evident by the way the writer claims to have seen the couple in the dead of night and heard all the woman's words. He saw all of this through the lattice of his window. In verse 8, the danger lurks even when one is not seeking it out. The boy is just passing along the street near her corner. He's not looking for danger. Note that in verse 9 we begin in the twilight in the evening. Then immediately it becomes dark at the time of night and darkness. First part 9a, we have twilight when people are still moving about. In verse 9b, it is the dead of night when people think they can be concealed. So let's go on with verses 10 through 23. Notice how the woman appeals to all 5 senses in this particular story. Then a woman comes toward him, decked out like a prostitute with hidden intent. She is loud and wayward. Her feet do not stay at home. Now in the street, now in the squares. And at every corner she lies in wait. She seizes him and kisses him. With impudent face she says to him, I had to offer sacrifices, and today I have paid my vows. So now I have come out to meet you, to seek you eagerly, and I have found you. I have decked my couch with coverings, colored spreads of Egyptian linen. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let us take our fill of love until morning. Let us delight ourselves with love, for my husband is not at home. He is gone on a long journey. He took a bag of money with him. He will not come home until full moon. With such seductive speech she persuades him. With her smooth talk she compels him. Right away he follows her, and goes like an ox to the slaughter, or bounds like a stag toward the trap, until an arrow pierces its entrails. He is like a bird rushing into a snare, not knowing that it will cost him his life. As allegory, this chapter describes the enticements of this world, which is compared to a whore. The world, like the harlot, is noisy and full of changes. It's also dark for fools who live in darkness and confusion. Just as the harlot deludes the boy about her husband, so the evil impulse, lust, deludes people about divine punishment. It doesn't say the woman is a harlot or a prostitute, but her prostitute-like garb gives her a harlotess appearance. This lesson sets the scene and mediates the events through the perceptions of an observer rather than simply recounting them as a third-person report. The reader is introduced into the scene and sees it with the eyes of the imagination. The eyewitness report gives the observations the heightened validity and authenticity of something seen with the eyes rather than merely heard with the ears. We are invited to join the narrator's voyeurism as he peers out the window on the dark street. The audience is lured into imagining erotic delights offered by the youth in the story. The writer does not see or report the results. The slaughter mentioned in verse 22 lies somewhere in the future. He declares the inevitable disaster as something that can be taken for granted without observation or proof. The focus is the seduction itself, whose powerful allure is described so that the reader may know what to beware of. Verses 24 through 27. And now, my children, listen to me, and be attentive to the words of my mouth. Do not let your hearts turn aside to her ways. Do not stray into her paths. For many are those who she has laid low, and numerous are her victims. Her house is the way to Sheol, going down to the chambers of death. Notice the author here does not envision the possibility that the woman might desist from her promiscuity and repent, nor does he care about the grievous consequences of her behavior for her. His motive is to make the danger realistic and memorable. He creates a plausible seduction scene and a believable seducer. The strange woman is sad and shabby, but still a menace. So we go on to chapter 8. The setting here is the wisdom's public call. The chapter stands in deliberate contrast to chapter 7. Here wisdom extends an invitation directly opposed to the invitation of the strange woman that we just heard. We heard about the evils of the strange woman whom we should shun compared with the praise of wisdom to whom we should draw near. So let's read chapter 8, verses 1 through 3. Here I am using Michael Fox's translation. Listen, isn't wisdom calling? Good sense raising her voice? Atop the heights near the road, at the crossroads, she takes her stand. Near the gates at the city entrance. At the portals, she cries aloud. So she, just like the strange woman, she's out on the streets crying to the people as they pass by. The chapter begins here with this rhetorical question. Listen, isn't it wisdom calling? Of course it is. Something is calling, some voice is being heard. It is wisdom's voice that we hear everywhere unless we stop up our ears. Wisdom's call is the voice of reason that we hear within our mind. And if we pay attention, we can get it. So let's read verses 4 through 11. To you, O men, I call. My voice is to mankind. Learn cunning, you who are callow, you dolts. Put some sense in your heart. Pay heed, for I have candid things to say. The opening of my lips is rectitude. For it is truth that my mouth declares, and my lips loathe wickedness. All the words of my mouth are in righteousness. Not one is contorted or warped. The discerning man sees that they are all honest. The knowledgeable know they are straight. Take correction, not silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than rubies. No valuables can match it. Wisdom's speech has 4 sections. And this one that we just read is the introduction. The speech is to all mankind, the smart folks and the stupid ones. We are all urged to pay attention. She has important things to say, and we are all being given the straight scoop. Wisdom is more valuable than money, gold or silver or rubies. Verses 12 through 21. We go on. I am wisdom. I inhabit cunning. Knowledge of shrewdness I find. The fear of the Lord means hating evil, pride and arrogance and wicked behavior. And duplicitous speech do I hate. Mine are counsel and competence. I am understanding. Power is mine. By me kings reign and governors decree righteous laws. By me princes rule. So too nobles, all judges of the earth. I love those who love me, and those who seek me find me. Wealth and honor are with me, enduring riches and righteousness. Better my fruit than finest gold, my yield than choice silver. I walk in the way of righteousness, within the paths of justice, to grant wealth to those who love me, their storehouses to fill. So here wisdom introduces herself and proclaims her powers. She commends herself as the source of statecraft and orders society itself. She says she is the source of wealth for her followers. Counsel, competence, and power are claimed by wisdom in verses 14 and 15. These she provides for the effective rulers who are able to achieve their goals. This is not a claim here that all kings rule wisely or mandate righteous law, but rather that wisdom is the principle of rulership, and effective government depends on it. So let's go on with verses 22 through 31. The Lord created me at the beginning of his way, at the start of his works of old. In primeval days I was formed, at the start, at the world's origin. The claim here is that wisdom was God's first creation. Wisdom was there at the very beginning. The speech from verses 1 through 21 is a celebration by wisdom of her powers, the preciousness of her words, the benefits she conveys to her followers. It's as though we have a new poem at this point. The poem that begins with verse 22 has a cosmic framework rather than a pragmatic one. This begins to sound like the Logos prose poem at the first chapter of the John's Gospel. So we go on. Verse 24. When there were yet no deeps, I was born. When there were yet no springs, sources of water. Before the mountains were set down, before the hills I was born. Ere he made the earth and the ground, the land's first lumps of soil. When he established the heavens, there was I. When he inscribed a circle on the face of the deep. When he secured the clouds on high. When he strengthened the founts of the deep. When he marked the bounds of the sea, that the waters transgressed not his command. When he firmed up the foundations of the earth. And I was near him growing up, and I was his delight day by day, frolicking before him at all times, frolicking in his habitable world, and my delight is in mankind. So we've changed the perspective from the present to the far past in verses 24 through 26. This is marked by a shift from the before clause in verse 25 to the when clauses in 27 through 29. Her own creation is dealt with in the verses through verse 25. From that point on, we are talking about wisdom's presence at the remainder of creation. We hear about the phases of creation and the role that wisdom had played in these. From here we go on to conclude the chapter from 32 through 36. And now, my sons, listen to me. Happy are they who keep to my ways. Heed correction and become wise. Brush it not aside. Happy is the man who listens to me, keeping vigil at my doors day by day, watching the posts of my portals. For he who finds me finds life, and obtains favor from the Lord. But he who offends against me harms himself. All those who hate me love death. In these verses, wisdom speaks of a different stage in her life, her maturity. She addresses mankind as sons and takes on a persona of the owner of the house where people gather as disciples. She talks of sons in verse 32. In verse 34, happy is the man who listens to me, keeping a vigil at my doors day by day, watching the posts of my portals. Chapter 9 tells us about two banquets, Lady Wisdom's banquet and Lady Folly's banquet. There are also what looks like some insertions, probably added at a later date. So we start with Lady Wisdom's feast, her Lady Wisdom's Banquet. Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. She has slaughtered her animals. She has mixed her wine. She has also set her table. She has sent out her female servants. She calls from the highest places in the town. You who are simple, turn in here. To those without sense, she says, come eat of my bread and drink of the wine I have mixed. Lay aside immaturity and live and walk in the way of insight. The invitation opens with a past tense narration of her house building and the elaborate preparation for a feast. In the middle of verse 3, the tense changes to the present. We go from what she has done to she calls, come eat my bread. The table, mealtime, are often seen as social functions, an opportunity for hospitality, which may serve as a place to find God. Abraham's 3 mysterious visitors met at a meal, and Abraham met God face to face. Communion at the Last Supper. In this poem, Lady Wisdom is offering hospitality. We're going to skip the next few verses for a moment and then go on to verse 13 and we'll come back. So verse 13 through 18. The foolish woman is loud. She is ignorant and knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house on a seat at the high places of town, calling to those who pass by, who are going straight on their way. You who are simple, turn in here. And to those without sense, she says, stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. But they do not know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of Sheol. So the description of Lady Wisdom's banquet focused on the preparation she made. The description of Lady Folly's banquet primarily deals with her character. She's loud, she is thoughtless, ignorant, and lazy, sitting at the door of her house, calling to those who pass by. It seems that Folly seeks the attention of any gullible passerby. Folly speaks abstractly about stolen water and bread eaten in secret. If you're looking for a dead end, head for Lady Folly's banquet. Verses 7 through 12 consist of a series of maxims or counsel for advanced wisdom students. These maxims may have been inserted into the chapter by a later scribe. We don't know where they came from. They don't seem to fit the original, but here they are. Verse 11, however, is often included with a section on Lady Wisdom's banquet. It's added to the end of that. So let's go with verse 11. For by me your days will be multiplied, and years will be added to your life. So let's read the other maxims, verses 7 through 10 and 12. And these, again, they're okay in here. They just don't fit the flow real well. So let's start with verse 7. Whoever corrects a scoffer wins abuse. Whoever rebukes the wicked gets hurt. Do not rebuke a scoffer, lest he hate you. Rebuke the wise, and he will love you. Give instruction to the wise, and they will become wiser still. Teach the righteous, and they will gain in learning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is insight. If you are wise for yourself. If you scoff, you alone will bear it. This section ends with a proverb about the personal consequences of being wise or being a scoffer. Chapter 9 is the final chapter in the first unit or section of Proverbs. Remember, we titled it The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. In this first section, we read a father's advice to his son and to his children. We also heard from Lady Wisdom, or the female personification of wisdom, present at the creation, available to everyone, but unfortunately few seem to avail themselves of the opportunities that wisdom provides. The next section, or collection of Proverbs, is titled The Proverbs of Solomon. This collection begins with chapter 10 and goes through chapter 22, verse 16. We'll begin reading some of these Proverbs today and continue on through session 6. Instead of a father's advice or exhortations from Lady Wisdom, we're mostly going to just be reading one-verse Proverbs in this unit. The style will be much like the maxims that we just read in verses 7 through 12 of chapter 9. Whoever corrects a scoffer wins abuse. Whoever rebukes the wicked gets hurt. One line, one verse. As we've said, these are attributed to Solomon. Chapter 10 is mostly a study in contrast: righteous and wicked, wise and foolish, prudent and shameful, diligent and lazy. We are not going to read and discuss every one of these individually, but let's start with the first 5 verses from chapter 10 to get a feel for this collection of Proverbs. So, verse 1 through 5. The Proverbs of Solomon. A wise child makes a glad father, but a foolish child is a mother's grief. Treasures gained by wickedness do not profit, but righteousness delivers from death. The Lord does not let the righteous go hungry, but he thwarts the craving of the wicked. A slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. A child who gathers in summer is prudent, but a child who sleeps in harvest brings shame. We see in this first grouping comparisons and contrast. A wise child makes a glad father as compared to a foolish child and a mother's grief. We could probably turn this around and say a wise child makes a glad mother and a foolish child a father's grief. Or we could say a wise child makes a glad father and a foolish child is a father's grief, without losing a whole lot of meaning. But the idea is to show contrast. So the poet shows contrast, not just from wise to foolish, but the poet swapped out the parents as well. Verse 2 said, treasures gained by wickedness do not profit, but righteousness delivers from death. This verse could come to be chanted in Jewish funeral processions, though the meaning of righteousness had shifted to charity at that point, which mourners were invited to offer. Verse 5, a child who gathers in summer is prudent, but a child who sleeps in harvest brings shame. As we have seen elsewhere, for example, the ant and the sloth, diligence as well as honesty is seen as a cardinal virtue in Proverbs. So we're going to read now verses 6 through 24. Blessings are on the head of the righteous, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. The memory of the righteous is a blessing, but the name of the wicked will rot. The wise of heart will heed commandments, but one with foolish lips will come to ruin. Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever follows perverse ways will be found out. Whoever winks the eye causes trouble, but one who rebukes boldly makes peace. The mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all offenses. On the lips of one who has understanding, wisdom is found, but a rod is for the back of the one who lacks sense. The wise lay up knowledge, but the mouth of a fool brings ruin near. The wealth of the rich is their fortress. The poverty of the poor is their ruin. The wage of the righteous leads to life, the gain of the wicked to sin. Whoever heeds instructions is on the path to life, but who rejects a rebuke goes astray. Lying lips conceal hatred, and whoever utters slander is a fool. When the words are many, transgression is not lacking, but the prudent are restrained in speech. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver, the mind of the wicked is of little worth. The lips of the righteous feed many, but fools die for lack of sense. The blessing of the Lord makes rich, the toil adds nothing to it. Doing wrong is like sport to a fool, but wise conduct is pleasure to a person of understanding. What the wicked dread will come upon them, but the desire of the righteous will be granted. So we're not going to discuss any of those right now. We'll talk about a couple more, this last group in chapter 10 from 25 through 32. So let's read these, and then we're going to discuss a couple of them. When the tempest passes, the wicked are no more, but the righteous are established forever. Like vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so are the lazy to their employers. The fear of the Lord prolongs life, but the years of the wicked will be short. The hope of the righteous ends in gladness, but the expectation of the wicked comes to nothing. The way of the Lord is a stronghold for the upright, but destruction for evildoers. The righteous will never totter, but the wicked will not remain on the earth. The mouth of the righteous brings forth wisdom, but the perverse tongue will be cut off. The lips of the righteous know what is acceptable, but the mouth of the wicked what is perverse. In verse 25, when the tempest passes, the wicked are no more, but the righteous are established forever. This is a bedrock assumption of Proverbs that is vehemently contested by Job, if you recall Job, that adversity sweeps away the wicked while the righteous endure. A variation of that same idea is in verse 27. The fear of the Lord prolongs life, but the years of the wicked will be short. Verse 26 says, like vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so are the lazy to their employers. This has a different, more interesting pattern from most of the verses that we've read so far. The first part of the verse lays out a simile, and the second part reveals the referent of the simile. It's a kind of like a riddle. What is it that is like vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, discoloring the former and making the latter hurt? Well, the answer to the riddle is a fool sent on an errand who is bound to exasperate whoever has sent him. Verse 32, the lips of the righteous know what is acceptable, but the mouth of the wicked is perverse. The parallelism provides a clue to what this proverb is all about, how the wicked acts or speaks in a wrong-headed or contorted way that is also disconcerting or dismaying to others through such behavior. In contrast, the speech of the righteous man has the capacity to please others and win their goodwill. We are going to look at just a handful of Proverbs from chapter 11. We'll start with the first 5 verses. Number 1, a false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but an accurate weight is his delight. When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but wisdom is with the humble. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the crookedness of the treacherous destroys them. Riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. The righteousness of the blameless keep their ways straight, but the wicked fall by their own wickedness. Verse 1 is about a false balance or cheating scales. A false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but an accurate weight is his delight. Much of the wisdom of Proverbs is oriented pragmatically toward the world of commerce or labor. Stones marked with a fixed weight were placed on one of 2 pans on the scale, and the merchandise to be sold on the other one. It had to be a fair balance. So let's look at verse 4. Riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. Let's compare that with verse 2 of chapter 10. Treasures gained by wickedness do not profit, but righteousness delivers from death. These two look similar in meaning, but the second half of these verses are identical, which may indicate that they came from some kind of a common source. Don't know, but they're identical, the second part of the verse. In verse 5, the righteous man's way is smooth. That means vertically smooth, not rough. This is in contrast to the wicked, who may fall into a pothole, for example. So we're going to go all the way down to verse 22 and read verse 22. Verse 22, like a gold ring in a pig's snout is a beautiful woman without good sense. This is another proverb cast in the form of a riddle. The first verset, or the first half of this verse, gives us a bizarre and somewhat shocking image. The second spells out a referent of the image, the beautiful woman with no good sense. Hence, it's kind of a punchline. Like a gold ring in a pig's snout is a beautiful woman without good sense. We're going to look at just one more from chapter 11. We'll be down at verse 30. The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and the wise capture souls. This one sounds kind of weird. Hard to make sense out of this. It's a little problematic that fruit becomes a tree. The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life. How's that? But maybe the poet was just thinking in terms of biblical usage, where fruit is often a metaphor for consequences, what one produces through his acts. So we might have the consequences of the acts of the righteous is a tree of life. The wise capture souls. That's all the verses from chapter 11 that we're going to discuss today. Feel free to read the remainder of chapter 11 on your own. We can talk about any of the Proverbs from chapter 10 or 11 that you would like to at our discussion session on Sunday night. In session 4, we will read all of the chapters 12 through 15. but there are 121 proverbs in those 4 chapters. So like today, we won't attempt to discuss every single proverb. But have a good week. We'll see you Sunday.